Before we start this video, a large thank you to Julius, Vesa, Merritt, and Kazarin for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And an immense thank you to Mike Harden Games for their immense support this month to this channel. Hello guys, and today we're going to make it so we hold on to our sword with two hands using Unity's rigging system. Now, if you're using a Cinti model like myself and you have not updated it, be warned, there are so many scaling issues with this model and it will not perform properly using any kind of rigging or animation for that matter. So what I suggest you do is update it to the latest version, which I'm going to do after this video. I'll show you what I mean later. So first, let's go to the package manager and let's go into where it says, it might say My Assets. You want to hit Unity Registry. What we're looking for is Unity's new rigging system. So let's just type in Animation Rigging, and you'll see it here, Animation Rigging 1.0.3 at the time of this video. So just install that. And what this is going to do is basically going to give us what looks like hand IK, so we can actually move our hand to the weapon when we're two-handing it if it doesn't exactly fit on it. This is if you don't have perfect animations. And I'm assuming most of you probably don't. So let's go and add the rig builder component to our player. Make sure it sits on the same game object as the animator. That is very important or else it will not work. And then what you want to do is actually go to the player, expand it down, and right-click, create an empty game object, call that rig layer. So I'm just going to call this rig layer. I don't think the naming here specifically matters, but this is what's recommended in the documentation. Add a rig to this, and then drag the rig layer game object into the rig builder. Okay, now we need to add two bone constraints, one for the left and right hand. So let's make an empty game object under the rig layer, call it right hand IK, and make another empty game object and call it left hand IK. And then add two bone constraint to both of these game objects. And if we open up our root, what we're going to want to do, you're going to see root, mid, and tip. That's just going to be the start of it, the middle, and the end. So it'll be the shoulder, the elbow, and the hand. So make sure you don't actually drag in shoulder or elbow attachment like I did here in this clip. If you're using the Cinti model, make sure you actually drag in elbow, and I do fix that. So then duplicate it, do the same thing with the left arm. And now again, if you are using a Cinti model, this will not work very well unless you update it to the latest version, because the transforms and scaling in the old models are so whack and it causes so many things. That's actually why in the tutorial we had to upscale our weapon pivot 100 times when we instantiated a weapon on our model's hand. Is because I'm using an old broken version of the model in this series, but I'm going to update it after this video because I'll show you the difference between the two-handing in this video and the two-handing in a project where the model is fixed. So if you scroll down here, you'll see source objects, and you'll see a thing called target. So this is actually what we want to attach our hands to, and we're going to actually put the target on our weapon as we instantiate it onto our character. But we need a way to actually locate that target. So first, let's open up the Animator Manager script. And I'm going to rename that quickly to Charactermanager Manager because it follows naming conventions and everything else then. Don't know why I did that in the last video, but we'll do that. In this video too, we're also going to integrate the player and enemy weapon slot manager to share one character weapon slot manager, because right now we have a lot of duplicate code, so we're going to clean that up a nice bit too. So this video is going to be a little bit long. Alright, so let's start off here, and on the Character Animator Manager, which I have just renamed, that was recently named the Animator Manager. Let's scroll down right to the bottom here, and let's go and make a new function. And we're going to call this function public virtual void set hand IK for weapon. And we're using virtual void because we might want to change how we handle this with enemies in the future. Maybe not, but we'll make it virtual just in case. Now, we're going to want to check if we are two-handing our weapon. And if we are, we're going to want to apply the hand IK if needed. And if not, we can disable hand IK for now. So again, if you have perfect animations that fit your weapons, you don't need this at all. But if you want to make modular animations to fit different types of weapons, this is where this rigging comes in handy. Let's make another function called public virtual void erase hand IK for weapon. And the reason why we're doing this is because you want to actually let go of the IK when you do things like you get damaged or you're performing a certain interaction or animation. Otherwise, your hands will still stay in the same place and will look kind of silly. I even erase it while doing attacks and then bring it back just to hold on to the weapon again. I'll show you what I mean later. So let's make a public two-bone IK. Oh, and for that we need to actually say using Unity engine. I think it's .animation.rigging. Animations.rigging, yes. And then make two public two-bone IK constraints. The first one called left hand constraint, and the next one called right hand constraint. And we're going to need to drag these in the inspector later on. These are just the constraints we made under the rig layer for our left and right hands. Okay, and let's make a protected rig builder for the rig builder. And we can call that onAwake. That's what we added to our character on the same game object as the animator. So we can simply say rig builder is equal to get component rig builder. We need to call the rig builder because every time we change anything on our constraints, we have to rebuild the rig, quote unquote. So what we do there is we just put that in code down here in this function, which we'll get to. Okay, before we move on, let's put a slash here. And we're just going to say assign hand IK to a target. So that means to our weapon. We got to figure out what we're actually sticking our hands to. I'm going to say to targets because it'll be 2 positions on the weapon. So what we want to do is actually figure out a way to make it so our hands know where to stick to on the weapon, and that's very straightforward. Let's start by opening up our sword model, and you'll need to do this for all of your weapons if you want IK. I'm just going to do it to demonstrate with the sword. So we can open a prefab, and what you want to do then is I'm going to place it under the weapon effects game object. I'm going to create an empty game object. I'm going to call this right hand IK, and then I'm going to add I'll call it right hand IK target. I'm going to add a script to it. But first I am going to create another empty and call it left hand IK target. Now, we're going to add an empty script to both of these game objects, but they're going to be different scripts. One's going to be called right hand IK target, and the next one is going to be called left hand IK target. And the reason why we're adding these reference scripts is because we're using these as a locator. So when we instantiate our model, we can look for these scripts and then get that transform and assign that transform as the hand IK target. We can also manipulate these transforms in real time to manipulate the IK positioning of our hands. So these will serve as just basically tools to posture our hands on the weapon. The important thing is that you have a left and right hand script, so you can find either. Or if you wanted to, you can make one script and have a bool for is left or is right. I'm just going to use 2 different scripts. Entirely up to you. Both will serve the exact same purpose. Okay, once that is done, go in here and erase it. I'm just going to make a comment for both of these saying this is just a script to locate an IK position on weapons for the left or right hand. I'm going to save that. And then back to the character animator manager here. Let's start actually dropping in some logic. So what we need our right hand IK target. And we need to pass a left hand IK target. So to use this function, we need to know where the left and right targets are on the weapon. So we know where to stick our hands. And then we need to know if we're two-handing the weapon or not. Because if we are, we're going to set the weight to 1, meaning we're going to actually use the hand IK or the rigging. And if we're not, we're going to set it to 0. So if is two-handing weapon, do some logic. Else, then basically disable the IK for now. So let's actually put some logic in here. We're going to say right hand target, or right hand constraint dot data dot target is equal to right hand target dot transform. So then we're assigning the target variable to the right hand target script, which is the position of the weapon. And then we're going to say right hand constraint dot data dot target position weight is equal to 1. And you can actually make a variable on your weapon for this. You can say hand IK target position weight, and you can actually set this between 0 and 1 to whatever you'd like. So if you want some weapons to have more weight, it's kind of like the animator. It'll just be more rigid. And then we're going to say rigid hand right hand constraint dot data dot target rotational weight is equal to 1. And then we're going to do the exact same thing for the left hand. So again, 1 being the max value of how strong this weight is. 0 means it's not active at all. You won't notice anything. 1 means it is fully active. And this applies to both the position and the rotation. So we want it to be fully active when we are two-handing a weapon. And then if we're not two-handing a weapon, we can simply just say resets or right hand constraint dot data dot target is equal to null, and so is our left hand. There we go. And there we go. Okay, that looks good. Now, down here, we say rig builder dot build, and that's it. Now, we haven't called this function yet. It will work, but again, we need to set this up. And right here, we're just going to basically make all the target positions and rotation weights reset to 0, but we're not going to do that just yet. Now, let's go over and check out the enemy weapon slot manager and the player weapon slot manager. As you can see, they actually have a lot of the same code. So we're going to start putting on the character weapon slot manager because we have a lot of double code written here. Let's copy and paste the load weapon slots and delete it from both, and then paste it over here in the character weapon slot manager. And then we're going to make it a protected virtual void. And the reason we're doing this is because so in the future, if we make any changes to any of this code, we don't have to do it on 2 different scripts, which can be really annoying and confusing. And if you forget, that can be very damning to your game. So now any change to the core build will happen on both. So let's copy this load weapon on both slots. And if it's on either script, delete it. And we're going to paste it again on the character weapon slot manager so both can use it. And I repeat, this makes it so much easier in the future because any alteration made on the core file will affect both, and that means we don't have to edit and write 2 times of the same or similar code every single time. We're going to make all these virtual voids because if we want to edit anything on their own individual scripts, we can do just that without having to rewrite code. So let's check this out here. On the player weapon slot manager, I'm just looking here at load weapon slot. Yeah, so we're going to copy all of this. We're going to change it to override void first. And then we're going to change this one to override void on the enemy weapon slot manager. And then we're going to copy the original on the player weapon slot manager and then paste it on the character weapon slot manager. Let's change override to virtual void so then the other 2 don't break. Now, let's actually check this for stuff we don't need. So we are going to bring that in. We don't need the UI because that doesn't apply for both, so erase that. You can just totally erase that. Get rid of it. The player animator manager, that can stay, but we have to change it to character animator manager. So let's do that. Now this stuff here, this can actually stay, but we need to change input handler to charactermanager.toEnd flag. So we're going to do that too. Let's start off by coming up here and saying character manager. And then on the awake, we're going to call that. So let's make an awake method. Character manager equals get component character manager. Okay. Now we can change this to character manager dot is two-handing weapon. Now we can change player animator manager to character animator manager because this will apply to both the character and the enemy, assigning different animations depending on the weapon. So let's call upon the character animator manager and call that in awake 2. You'll notice about 20 seconds ago, I accidentally deleted a line of code with player animator manager on it. If you're watching this, don't delete that line of code. Change player animator manager to character animator manager. I do fix it later on in the video, but it was right there under the if is left. So character animator manager, that's good. And let's copy that, and wherever we find that, let's paste it. Okay, we don't need that there, so let's delete that. That looks good. Okay, so now the player inventory manager. So again, we do need an inventory manager for both. We're going to move the enemy's weapons from the player or enemy weapon manager to a new enemy inventory manager, because in the future, enemies will have gear and weapons just like you that they can change or you can equip to them using the inspector. So let's first make a script. Let's call it character inventory manager. And then let's make another script, enemy inventory manager. But first, let's go to our character inventory manager and set it up. So let's erase the start and update function. Let's make our namespace, as is per tradition, -SG. And then we go over to the folder and make another script. I'm going to call it enemy inventory manager. And then we make both player and enemy derived from the character inventory manager. And I think that is the last couple of scripts after the weapon slot manager. And then we have both the player and enemy sharing basically everything, which is fantastic. Again, my namespace, -SG. And let's change enemy inventory manager to derive from character inventory manager. And then we change player inventory manager to derive from character inventory manager. Okay, so every player and enemy in the game can have a consumable. They can have a left and right weapon. They can have a spell. They can have full set of equipment. They can have weapon slots. So we can take all of this right now, everything right here, and copy that from the player and delete it and paste it on the character inventory manager. because in the future enemies can shoot spells, they will be able to cycle through weapons, etc., etc. So let's paste that right here. Okay, that looks good. Now, let's see what we got going on here. Now, in the enemy weapon slot manager, remove left and right weapon. Get rid of it. We're not using that anymore. We're going to withdraw the enemy's weapons from the inventory. Remove this on the player inventory manager. Just delete this. Delete the start method too. We're not using that here. We're going to do our starts on the base class and erase that. Okay, that's good. Now, this is going to take some time, guys, because we're going to restructure this so they both essentially share the same logic. Let's make an awake method on the character inventory manager and a start method. And bear with me here. Let's first call upon our character weapon slot manager, and let's call that on awake. And remember, when we're calling these classes, if you have a player weapon slot manager or an enemy weapon slot manager, they will still load. They still count as a character weapon slot manager. Then on start, we're going to say character weapon slot manager load weapons on both slots. Okay. Now on the character weapon slot manager script, let's make a character inventory manager. Call that character inventory manager. We will declare that on awake again by saying character inventory manager equals get component character inventory manager. So as you can see, we're kind of combining both of these now. We'll have to do most of the work on the enemies side of things because things are a bit different. So let's change player inventory manager to character inventory manager. There we go. Excellent. Wonderful. Now, this loading damage collider function, we're going to take that over too because that's shared across both of the enemy and the player. We need damage colliders for both. So let's go over to the player weapon slot manager. Okay, that looks good. We'll keep that there for now. Let's take the load right and left damage collider functionality. And let's erase that. Copy it first, though, of course. I'm just going to get rid of this region because, again, I don't think regions are nice anymore. I kind of think they're ugly. Now, let's paste this on the character weapon slot manager. We're going to need to do some work with this, I believe. Yes. Okay, so let's turn this to a protected virtual void in case we need to change something on either of the other classes that derive from this. Again, changing both of these to a protected virtual void. Now, everywhere that you see it says player inventory manager or effects manager or stats manager, we have to get the base class version of that. So that will be character stats, character effects, character inventory. Let's erase load weapons on both hands from the enemy weapon slot manager. And let's erase load weapons damage colliders. I know I'm going fast, but you guys can keep up. By this point in the series, I'm sure you're all very adept at this. Okay, so we're changing this to character. And again, we're changing this to character. And we don't have the player stats manager or effects manager called yet, or the character effects or stats rather. Let's change this to character and this to character. Okay. All right, so now let's call up our character stats manager and our character effects manager, which again is the base class for the enemy stats, player stats, and enemy effects and player effects. So if the enemy or player have those scripts, they will still count as the character base class scripts, which is what makes this so effective and why shared logic is so great and deriving from classes is so powerful. So we'll call that an awake again. We're going to say character stats manager equals get component character stats manager, which will pick up a player, enemy, or character stats manager script. And then we will say character effects manager is equal to get component character effects manager. There we go. And again, this will pick up a character, player, or enemy effects manager script. Okay. Now let's go down and change our names to character, which is going to make all this logic work again. There we go. Character. Excellent. Character. Excellent. Character. And character. That looks lovely. Okay. Wonderful. Save. Next, let's go to our player weapon slot manager again, okay? And we're looking at our open and close damage colliders. Let's take that by copying it and deleting it. And make sure you also delete it from the enemy damage collider, open and close. Now, the enemy handles it a bit differently than the player because we only had a way to detect the enemy's right-handed weapon. But the player, it can detect the left or right-handed weapon, as you can see. So we're going to make this a virtual void. We're going to change player manager to character manager. And what we're going to do is we're also going to give the enemy the ability in this video to detect whether it's using its left hand or its right hand, which will be very simple. But for now, let's not worry about that. Okay, that's good. There we go. Looks good. Save it again. Okay, back on the player weapon slot manager scripts. That's okay. So both use poise, but the enemy uses poise a little bit differently. The enemy just has its poise entered in the script, whereas, or the inspector rather, whereas the player gets its poise from a weapon when it attacks. As the weapon changes, so does the player's poise change, but the enemy's doesn't change because enemies only have one weapon right now. So let's actually go down here. There we go. And change this to character. But what we're going to do is we're going to make it a virtual void again. And we're going to let the enemy override this, but not have it on the player's script. So this will be on the character weapon slot manager script, but not on the player weapon slot manager script. And let's grab this attacking item here and copy it and delete it from the player weapon slot manager and put that on the character weapon slot manager. We might use that in the future for the enemy too. We probably will. That just tells us what weapon we're currently attacking with. Okay, so then on the enemy weapon slot manager, we can actually just put this back and we can just say public override void for now. If in the future we decide to make it so enemies cycle their weapons, which I'm sure we will, we'll come back to this and we'll just delete this altogether, the override. Okay, so there we go, override. Okay, looks good, looks great. Again, I'm going to delete this region because I don't like it. They're very ugly. I liked them at one point, not sure why. And you need to go to your region. In the future, by the way, we're going to actually make enums for different types of attacks, and we'll have one function that can detect which type of attack you're using and drain stamina based on that. But that's a future polish video. Delete, enable, and disable combo on enemy weapon slot manager. It's not even used right now. Also delete, drain, stamina, light attack, and heavy attack because enemies don't have stamina. I don't plan on giving them stamina either. Load weapon on slot. We're actually just going to, again, delete that because now it's on the character manager base class. Okay. Looking real good, real clean too. Delete the start method and the awake method. Yes. Okay. All right. Now over here on the player weapon slot manager, what do we got going on? Let's check this out. I think we're good now. That looks nice. Okay. Now we have an awake method here, and a lot of this is because let's delete the animator. We don't use that. It's not being called anymore. Delete that. It's because we're using a throw the firebomb, and we're using a camera and effects manager. Change this to character stats manager. Oh, and we need to make that protected. Okay, so over here on the character weapon slot manager, change all these variables to protected so we can actually use them on the classes that inherit the base class. And then on the enemy weapon slot manager, change this to character stats manager. And again, character stats manager and character stats manager. There we go. Okay, cool. That looks good. That looks good. Excellent. All right, let's save that again. Over here on the player inventory manager. Let's make this protected on the character inventory manager. And then on the player inventory manager, we can just change player to character. Okay, do the same thing down here. Good, good, good. And the same thing here, here, and here. And this is for change left weapon. You'll need to do the same for change right weapon too. I know this is a lot of moving stuff around, guys, but trust me, it'll be so worth it in the future. You won't know how much time this will save us if we make a change, and we will, to our systems. Instead of going to both the player and enemy, we can just go to one master script. And what's also amazing is we can make very modular enemies with this. We can treat them like players. We can have their own armor and their own weapons and stuff. So change player inventory manager to character inventory manager. There we go, and change the play. Delete the quick slots UI. This is on the character weapon slot manager script. Change player to character. Wherever you see player, change it to character. Delete quick slots UI again, and again, player animator manager is character animator manager, and we should be good to go. Okay, excellent. Now we have to add the enemy inventory manager scripts to the enemy, or else this won't work. I'm going to assign him the sword. I'm going to put it in the weapons right hand slot 0, and I'm going to put it in his current right hand weapon. So he has a sword in his hand. And then on the character inventory manager, on awake, we're going to say, we forgot to actually call it, character weapon slots manager equals get component character weapon slots manager. All right, we still got to do a couple more things. We're almost done though. Let's go to the enemy and let's give him a back weapon slot holder. So on a spine, I'm just going to create an empty game object, call this back slot. I'm going to drop one of these scripts we made ages ago here called weapon holder slot. Let me check this out. Yeah, weapon holder slot. I'm going to tick is back slot. This is in the future if we allow our enemy to two-hand on the fly, he just puts his offhand weapon on his back, which will just look cool. Okay, then get the unarmed weapon, drag it into the enemy weapon slot manager. That's important. We need that there. And let's make the private void awake on character weapon slot manager protected virtual void awake. And then the player weapon slot manager, we make this a protected override void. And we say at the top of this base dot awake. This lets us call the base awake method and fill in all those other variables and calls our regular awake method because we have stuff here we need only for the player, like the camera and stuff. Also, we can delete load weapons on slots from there, and we can put it on the character manager on awake. Don't put it on start. I'm just making a start method here. I realized that I shouldn't put it on start like right here because the weapon holder slots are actually the slots where we instantiate our weapons. So we want that called before we instantiate our weapons. Okay, now over here you can see our animations. We've changed the names of them. So if you go to our enemy's attacks, they're broken. Let's just replace those. Light hand, sword attack, or just light hand attack 1, 2, 3, and 4. And again, this will make it easier because these names can stay the same forever now. You just change the attack by changing the animator controller. So you can keep these names the same indefinitely. So next over here on our enemy, if we actually go over to him now in the game, we'll check him out. Let's run over his way. You can see he has a sword, and it actually popped up and instantiated it just like ours did. But you'll notice he can't hit us. And that is because, as I said before, the enemy used to enable a damage collider just with a script. But the player does it by deciding if we're using our left or right hand, and then it will pick the damage collider in our left or right hand. So we're going to do the same for our enemies. So in the future, enemies can use either the left or right hand. You can see the bool for is using right hand is not firing on this enemy when he attacks me. So let's go to the enemy manager. We're going to say is using left hand is equal to animator manager dot animator dot get bool is using left hand. And then we're going to say is using right hand is the same thing, but with the right hand. So it will say is using right hand is equal to animator manager dot animator dot get bool is using right hand. Now we also have to reset this bool after we go back to the empty state. That way we're not keeping two damage colliders open at once. So we'll do that as well. And we have to make sure we're actually having a way to decide if we're using our left or right hand. So in the enemy action script, make a public bool for right hand action or is right hand action. I'm going to defaultly enable that as true. You can also have a bool there for is left-handed action if you want as well, or you can just use if it's not a right-handed action, it's left-handed action. Now in the attack state, right at the top of attack target, we're going to say animator manager dot animator dot set bool is using right hand. And then we're going to set that to the status of current attack dot is using right hand or is right hand action, whatever we just called it. Yeah, is right-handed action. And then we copy and paste that. Do the same thing for the left hand. We set bool is using left hand with the opposite of whatever the right-handed action is. So if we are using the right hand, it is not a left-handed option. There we go. And now again, we just need to reset these bools, paste them to here with attack target with combo, because those are both for attack states. Now let's go to reset animator bool, and let's make two more of these sections. One for is using right hand and is using left hand. And just as we did below, we're just going to reset the status of them after the attack ends. This is important too for the player because we hadn't had this done before, and now it is done. But before, I think if we were using an attack with the player, it would have kept our is using right hand status open indefinitely, which is not what we want. So now it will close again once our animation is completed, which is what we want. Okay, is using right hand, is using left hand status. And again, that's disabled, or that's at false by default, because every time we're done an animation, we want to actually make sure it resets. So down here, just type it in, is using right hand status, and then is using left hand status. Now our enemy should be able to damage us again as per usual, which is even nicer is now he has logic the same as the player. So if you are using a weapon in the offhand, using those animations, he will actually read that. And yep, there we go. We can get damaged again. That is wonderful. And we can damage him, so we're good to go. All right, now moving back to actually two-handing the weapon, which is what the original purpose of this video was. Let's go down to the character weapon slot manager, and let's make a header called hand IK targets. Let's make a right hand IK target for our right hand IK and a left hand IK target for our left hand IK. And again, these are going to change every time you equip a weapon because we get these from the weapon. So down here where we load weapon on slot, what we want to do is actually make a function called protected virtual void load two-hand IK targets. And we're only using this when we're two-handing a weapon, for now at least. So let's say left hand IK target equals, it's actually supposed to be right hand slot. I made a mistake here. I do correctly though, so it's right hand slot dot current weapon model dot get component in children left hand IK target. And the reason why it's the right hand slot is because we only ever two-hand the weapon in our right hand. So that means we're only ever looking for the slot in our right hand. And again, do the same thing with the right hand. And I think you do see me correct this now in this clip. And then when you want to say character animator manager dot set hand IK for weapon, right hand target, left hand target, and then we're going to pass is two-handing weapon and just make a bool in that function for is two-handing weapon. So it should be load two-hand IK targets with a bool for is two-handing your weapon. Okay. Now we actually need to place this somewhere in the project and call it. So let's do that. If you scroll up here, you want to actually call it if you are two-handing your weapon. So the perfect spot to do that obviously will be right here if we're right-handing it and then if we're two-handing it. You can do it in several places. So I'm just going to actually place it in a couple and you can decide where you want to keep it. So right here, I'm just going to say load two-hand IK targets, charactermanager.is two-handing weapon. And then whether you're two-handing it or not, it will read it from the character manager, and then you'll have it right here. So if you're not two-handing it, it will reset it. If you are two-handing it, it will actually lock to the IK targets. Now, if you also want to, you can go over to the input manager, and you can call it there as well, where you have the two-hand flag. And I will show you. So down here, what you want to do first is put this has to come first. That's very important. So change player manager to is two-handing weapon, true or false. Make that at the top of the logic. We want to do that instantly. And then we call the logic for loading weapon on slot. But you can also put it right here. You can say weapon slot manager dot, what did I call that? Oh, I need to make it public. And again, this is optional, whichever place you choose to put it. It's up to you. I'm just putting it here to show you. Load two-hand IK targets, and then you just pass the character manager or player manager dot is two-handing weapon. Here you can put true because you're always two-handing it, and here you can put false because you're never two-handing it. It's just a fail-safe. In both places it will work, entirely up to you. Now, if we go into the game here, let's drag our right hand and left hand constraints in the inspector. Forgot to the ages ago, it's very important. And let's actually, as you can see here, as I said before, this should be right hand slot because we're only ever two-handing our right-handed weapon, never our left-handed weapon. Now, if we go into the game here and we hit the two-hand button, you can see we have that funny little pose, and he two-hands the weapon, kind of. Now, what you want to do, and I can't stress enough, you can see my feet even sunk into the ground. This is because the model is janked. I'm going to update the model after this video, but what you want to do, I'm still going to show you how to actually adjust the two-hand yourself. Go down here to right hand and left hand IK target, and you want to manipulate these variables here, the rotations. It's easier to manipulate it in the inspector instead of actually using the tool on screen because you'll get a more finer response. But basically, change this around until you figure out a place where it is and you like it. And then open up the sword prefab while still in the scene view, copy the transform component, and paste the transform component on the right-hand IK target and the left-hand IK target. You can get this looking pretty good. Not so much with this model. Again, it actually looks usually quite terrible with this model because all of the scaling is broken so badly. It's just, you see, look, I'm turning this arrow up right now. It's barely moving. It's bad. I'll show you a comparison on screen now of what it looks like in my solo project with the fixed model. You can get it looking real nice. So I suggest if you don't have this updated, update this model immediately. I'm just going to do the best with what I can right now until this video is over, and I'll update it off camera. So I'll copy a component and then paste it into the sword on the right hand IK target and the left hand IK target. And then I will copy this component as well. And when I do replace the model, I will show you guys on screen if I have to fix anything in the next video, because we're going to do a housekeeping episode again too, so I can fix a few bugs. Okay, and you're going to have that, and if you have a good model, your feet won't be into the ground. So we go back in the game now, and we press the two-handed button. You'll see you grab onto it, and there you go. Again, it looks a little bit janky because of the model, and then you can run around, and it has its value. Now, there is one problem with this right now, and it's that if we attack or get damaged or roll, you can see the model kind of locks up and looks silly. It won't look that bad if you have a model that's not completely broken, but it will look a little bit rigid. So what we're going to do is we're going to disable the hand IK when we're performing an action or we're interacting and taking some form of damage. And then we'll reset it when we're two-handing it and we're not doing anything else. So when you're running around, you'll be holding the weapon perfectly, but when you're performing an action, it won't look as rigid. And it will look nice. I'll show you what I mean in the next video. So basically, we can paste this player Animator Manager.erase hand IK for weapon on the handle RB action. And then every time we attack, we will actually just erase our hand IK and we'll stop making it look so rigid. Now, on the next video, we're going to reset that hand IK every time we're done an action. And we're also going to place erasing the hand IK in on different actions like rolling and taking damage, so it just looks clean. So in the next video, we're going to do a housekeeping video, and we're going to polish off the rest of the system and make it look nice in all areas of the game where we're going to use it. And then that will be the final piece of the puzzle before we begin our archery system. So if you guys did like this video, don't forget to leave a like. That does genuinely help my series out a lot. Leave a comment. Does help appease the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you're feeling like a super champion, check out my Patreon below. Anyway, guys, again, if you are using the old model in Cinti, I highly suggest you update it because moving forward, you will have a hostess of problems if you do not. You probably already have problems without noticing it with the animations. If you update it, things will look a lot smoother and cleaner. And the reason why we had to actually scale our weapon up 100 times in previous videos when we instantiate the model is because of that model. Now we actually won't have to do that. So I will see you guys in the next episode where we will fix some bugs.